All right. So as Fran mentioned, I'm by no means a winter expert at all. I'm actually really, really new to winter. But one thing I found is that I actually love winter. I never knew that. I've always my whole life kind of told myself I don't like winter. I've kind of hibernated, typically done a lot of indoor things. But this year, with the unique circumstances, I decided, of all years, this is the year to really embrace winter. And so I kind of did some work up front, both thought wise as well as equipment wise. And much to my surprise, I have not been cold, and I've been outside on the coldest of the days, even when it's been 20 below zero. But to my bigger surprise is I love winter. And now I get it why people are sitting and watching the forecast and hoping for snow and watching the snow conditions and trying to figure out what's going on and talking about their winter gear, just like they talk about their summer gear. So what I'm hoping to do here is just give you some of my insights and things that I found that work for me. But more than that, Fran and I really hope to open it up at the end and have both our new members and prospective members and our long-term members really share what works for them. So we're hoping to have a big discussion. My slideshow, just for reference, all of the pictures that'll be in it are actually photos that I've taken around the metro this winter. So it's been kind of fun to just see what I see when I'm out and about. So on this title slide, I got up for a sunrise walk one morning at Lake Harriet, and to my surprise, there's a guy out in the middle of the lake building an igloo. And so I tried to think about, is he building the igloo for himself, or is he building it as a surprise for a kid later that day? I'm not exactly sure, but it was just such an idyllic scene to have him in the middle of the lake building his igloo. So one thing in dealing with a cold is thinking about before you head outside. And I think a lot of times, we think about what we're going to put on as far as our coat and our gloves and so forth. But there's other things I think to be thinking about. Number one is, make sure that you are completely warm and actually probably a little bit warmer than you'd want to be before you head out. So one thing I do if I'm driving somewhere is I always, have the seat heat on, blasting the heat, make sure I'm like got my core temperature up and I'm feeling cozy before I head out. Being hydrated as well is important. Water is actually a really good retainer of heat. And so if you're dehydrated, you're actually going to feel a little bit chillier than you are fueled up. By that, I mean having a high fat snack, like if you have some peanut butter or an energy bar, just something in your stomach, because the way our bodies work, metabolizing food actually helps to build heat as well. Um, One thing that I've become real good friends with is my phone, and I actually have a table, like a little countertop temperature gauge that predicts the temperature, and becoming in tune with the temperature as well as the wind chill and what the precipitation forecast is. And so you can get to know like what type of gear you need for each particular temperature or wind chill. And then having extra water, food, and clothing with you. I'm mostly going to talk about just day excursions where you're outside for a couple of hours. Fran's going to talk about camping and so forth. So I'm talking about when you're heading out in your car, you're heading out on your bike, and you have a backpack where you have the capacity to bring stuff with you. Just always bring a little bit of extra with you. This photo here was actually on Bade Makaska. Fat bikers just one day cruising across the lake, which is kind of fun to see. So this was my biggest surprise this winter. We had that really cold snap right after the blizzard, and I randomly, back in September, before winter even occurred, I picked up some random gear. I didn't even really know why I picked it up. I saw it on sale. I thought ski goggles. I don't ski. I don't know why I would need those, but let's throw them in the cart. They're cheap. They're $20 ski goggles. Threw those in the cart. I found this face mask at a thrift store. I don't know what I was going to do with it. It's actually a full, I think balaclava is how you say it. It actually goes all the way over my head, and it's a neck warmer as well. I bought that at a thrift store. And I also bought some ski snow pants at a thrift store as well. And so what I was kind of surprised by is I typically in the past have always had a rule I didn't really go outside unless it was above 20. But on this day, the wind chill was 20 below, and I thought I'm going to test out all this random stuff that I bought to see how it works. And I've got to see, ski goggles are amazing. Like I've never skied in my life. But when you wear the ski goggles, your eyes no longer water and then your nose doesn't run. And so you're instantly just a lot warmer. Um, the ski mask, if you've never worn one, I like this particular one because it has a lot of room for my breath to escape. And I know in COVID, people are wondering like, how does that work? I have another neck gaiter on, the pink gaiter. So if people would walk by me and I don't want to be breathing on them, I actually pull up another gaiter there. But I like when I'm by myself that my breath can escape and I'm not getting wet and damp because wet equals cold. Um, Gaiters, buffs, and scarves, like I'd recommend combining all of them. Generally, all winter, I pretty much have a gaiter on now of some sort, even in the house, and then just throwing a scarf on top of that is extra warm. As I mentioned, the snow pants that I got, you can get those at thrift stores, you can get them anywhere. They're just amazing. You can throw them on over a pair of leggings and makes a huge difference. Up until this year, the only thing I would wear was I would wear leggings under jeans, and the snow pants make an amazing difference. And then heated gloves or hand warmers. This picture here is at Lake Harriet. You can see the bandshell in the background. It was pretty amazing day because it was the day after that really big snowstorm, and then the temperature dropped fast, but the water was actually still open. The lake was completely open. I for a brief moment contemplated kayaking because the water was open and it was steaming, and Chris and I do kayak till the lake freezes every year. But I didn't do it this time because I had a case of this year. I kayaked on the lake when it was half covered with ice and the wind shifted and then it blew the ice at me and I had to quickly get out of the lake. So I thought better skip it this time. So for this time, I just enjoyed the beauty, but that was kind of a fun thing. One thing that's life-changing, and this is, I'll say this is an investment, is heated gloves. And I'm including a slide here because a lot of people have asked me about the heated gloves, and everywhere that I wear them, people ask me about them as well. I bought these at Costco in September for about $100. What they are is you can see they each have a lithium battery, and the lithium batteries you charge them in your computer or a phone or in a wall jack, and they have 5 different heat settings. They'll operate on high heat for about 2 hours, low heat for about 6. For me, they're life changing. I have some arthritis in my hands, and I know a lot of people do. It makes it completely comfortable to be outside. And what I found is if you can keep your hands, your face, and your feet warm, you'll actually never be cold. And so I actually get hot with the gloves. It's kind of interesting. A lot of your body heat escapes out of your head, your hands, and your feet. And you can regulate your entire body temperature a lot by just those 3 things. Costco does not have these anymore. They sold out really quickly, but you can get them online if it's something you're interested in. Like I said, they're an investment, but I think we all decide what outdoor gear we want to invest in and what's important to us. The other thing that's a good substitute for this is those Hot Hands hand warmers, the little packets that you have, and you can take those packets, you can put them in your gloves, you can put them in your shoes, you can actually stick them in like a hooded sweatshirt pocket to help keep your core warm. You can throw them in your bottom of your sleeping bag and so forth. So that's a good substitute that costs a lot less. Another tip is knowing your base layers and tailoring to the temperature. I'm not going to talk a ton about clothing because other people have talked about that in the biking session as well as this snowshoeing session. But this was something that took me a little bit to figure out. You think you've got these tights or these long johns or long underwear, whatever you're going to call them, your high-tech clothes you're going to put on underneath, the clothes that you wear against your body. But there's 3 different types of that gear. There's silk weight, which is really, really thin. There's merino wool, or there's like a mid weight. It can be made of polyester as well. And then there's fleecy gear. And so figuring out which of those weights of base layer you need to wear, I think it goes a long way in helping you regulate your temperature so that you don't get cold and you also don't get too hot. For instance, today was a day where you definitely wear silk weight. You wouldn't want to be sticking a lot of fleece on because it was so warm. So just paying attention to your base layers. This photo here was taken at Richardson Nature Center. which is the nature center in Highland Park Reserve down in Bloomington. There was some really pretty like frost. There's been a lot of frost this year with all of the fog that we've had in the morning. And it was really cool. Like the entire oak tree, all of the leaves were outlined in frost, which was kind of neat to see. Next is knowing your footwear and tailoring it to the temperature. The number one key is the first item on here is the space between your toes and your boots. Up until this point, I always thought, you wear more socks. You put on 2 pairs of socks, then your feet will be warmer. You get a bigger pair of boots, your feet will be warmer. A lot of it has to do with you need to keep that buffer of air between your feet in your socks and your boots. So a lot of times it's better to have your boots slightly too big than slightly too small. Another thing is a lot of people want to wear their regular hiking boots to go, their 3-season hiking boots to go hiking in the winter. And I always did this too. But if you have things with the mesh or the ventilation holes, your feet are just going to get cold, especially if you're going to try to bike in the winter. It doesn't work so well. Good winter boots like Sorels, Keens, like a lot of those boots, they are an investment. But I will say that if you look around, you can find things really inexpensive. Just 2 days ago, off our neighborhood next door website, I found a pair of used Sorel boots for $35. I had to drive over by Lake Nokomis to get them, but it was incredible. It was somebody, she just said, yeah, I'm kind of a collector of boots and I had too many and I was selling them. So one thing to keep in mind is there are other avenues to find some of this gear affordable because some of it is really an investment up front. The socks, like I said, thicker is not always better. It depends what your socks are made of and having that space. And then one thing I've discovered this year is knee-high socks, which I've never liked, but they're pretty amazing. You can get away with, maybe not wearing a base layer on your bottom if you have the knee-high socks on. And they don't fall down in your boots. So they've been pretty amazing. This photo here is at Lake Harriet. I was walking around. This was also on one of those sub-zero days. And there was a gentleman sitting on a park bench and he just started chatting with me and he was having such a great time sitting with the sun shining in his face. And it motivated me. I thought, you know what? I'm going to go sit up in the lifeguard chair. And I ended up sitting up in the lifeguard chair for like 45 minutes. And I wasn't even cold. Like I'm sitting in my full snow gear. I had my face mask, all of the stuff you saw in that earlier picture. And it was pretty amazing. And it was eye-opening that it kind of made me see, like, while I would probably never winter camp, I can see how people would want to winter camp and how they could feasibly stay warm. So it was kind of an eye-opening moment that day. The last piece of clothing thing I'll talk about is just knowing your puffy coats. I've always had this puffy coat that I'm wearing here, the long North Face coat that a lot of people have. You see it all over the city. And I always thought you put on like your base layer, your winter sweater, maybe another shirt. So you've got like 3 shirts on and then you're sticking your puffy coat on and you should really be warm. But that's actually not the case. Like to stay the warmest in a puffy coat, I only wear a base layer now. You wear the base layer and you give the puffy coat tons of space for all of those feathers to puff out and all of the air to get around the feathers. And so that's what I mean by the less is more, like thinking about if you're going to wear a lot under the coat, it's going to compress that down or the synthetic fill and stretch it out, and it's not going to have the air, and you're actually going to be colder rather than warmer. So it's something to kind of play around with. The other thing is noticing what fill levels your coats have. Down comes in all different fill levels, and the higher the number, the warmer the coat is. And for instance, trying to wear a really high fill power coat like this one when it's above 30 degrees is actually kind of miserable because you're really hot because it's just too warm. So paying attention to what your puffy coats are. I know a lot of the rovers have either long ones or they have short ones, or they have ones that are just kind of pullovers. It's a really popular item. So just keeping in mind possibly less is more. This picture here was a New Year's Day hike. One of my New Year's resolutions was to really embrace winter and try new things. So we went up to the Coon Rapids Dam. I think the park is being rebranded, and I think it's called like Mississippi Regional Park or something like that. I forget the name, but it was pretty amazing to see the dam. If you haven't been there in the winter, it's just beautiful, and the sound is really cool. They rent snowshoes there. They have a nice trail for snowshoeing along the river as well as in the woods, and then the path across the dam is plowed, so you can just walk across it in your boots. It's a really nice place. One thing to keep in mind is it's easier to keep warm than to get cold and try to warm up. So the key is, don't let yourself get cold. And then later on I'll talk about, but also don't let yourself get hot. So constantly monitoring, do I need to open some zippers? Do I need to put something else on? Do I need to put up my hood? Do I need to cinch up my hood? Do I need to put my gaiter over my face so that I'm retaining a little bit more heat? But kind of constantly monitoring your state, whether you're getting chilled, whether you're getting too hot, or whether you're comfortable. Lounging outside. I love to sit outside all year round, and I would sit outside usually till it snowed. And now I actually sit outside now in the middle of winter. I love it. But some keys are, you don't ever want to sit on a cold surface. So you need to have something between you and what you're sitting on. So it can be anything. It can be a piece of cardboard. It can be a piece of styrofoam. I like to sit on my, it's like a foam kneeling mat that I use for gardening, a little foam cushion. So you sit on that. And what happens then is the cold isn't able to transfer, because what happens is heat and cold, operate via conduction, and the cold will transfer to you if you're sitting on a cold surface. So putting something between you and what you're sitting on is number one. The second thing is if you can somehow get a cocoon of air around you. So I like to wrap up in this old comforter we found, and wear my winter clothes, but then yet wrap in the comforter, because then you have yet this additional cocoon of air around you, which really helps keep you warm. Third tip is keeping your feet off the ground. So again, that conduction. If you have your feet on the cold ground, like cold snowy ground, cold frozen ground, or especially like cold concrete here, your feet will get really cold being that way. So what I like to do is elevate my feet. And if you can get your feet off the ground, once again, then you have all that air around your feet instead of the cold transferring to your body. And like I've mentioned, your head, neck, feet, hands being warm is key. This hat I found on clearance last year. It's a wool baseball cap that has ear flaps, and it looks kind of funny, but it's great. It keeps me super warm. And then just a note, if you like to sit around at home outside, your computer on your lap is like a wonderful, wonderful little source of heat. I like that. And then the other thing is I have like a microwavable wrap like this that I like to sit on my lap to keep warm. So quick things, like basically one thing that'll keep you warm outside is being active. And Barry did a great presentation on snowshoeing. So I've found a couple things that are like great for keeping you warm. Number one is snowshoeing. And here's just some suggestions of where you can go. This picture was taken last year at the last overnight trip that was able to take place with the Rovers before COVID hit. So this was taken up at Deep Portage. The hope would be we can have that trip again in the future. It was really, really fun. It was the trip that I actually got introduced to snowshoeing at, and it was kind of funny because we snowshoed there and all the snow was melting that weekend, and there really wasn't much time to go snowshoeing afterwards. It was about 40 some degrees, but that was really fun. So looking forward to when trips can be going again. Another really good way to stay active and warm is cross-country skiing. I never cross-country skied until last week. And if anyone out there is thinking about doing it, I skied twice in Phi Ed class in high school, maybe 30 years ago. And then I never tried it. I guess I always told myself I'm not a skier. And this year I decided I'm going to ski, and I went and bought some cross-country skis, and it's amazing. Like I've went every day since I got the skis. I'm kind of addicted. I will preface it with I've only went on flat ground, But that's my suggestions here. These are some suggestions of places where you can go where the terrain, all of the lakes, are completely flat. So if you're thinking of going, they're a good place to start. But it's pretty amazing how warm you can get while skiing. You really don't need to wear a whole lot of clothes. I was just shocked. You're actually soaking wet and sweating most of the time, unless you're really, really conscious of just wearing like one or two pieces of clothing. Um, so I highly recommend it. You can rent skis all over town by reservation this year. There's an amazing, this picture here is Lake of the Isles. I think, yeah, Lake of the Isles. There's an amazing classic as well as skate track on Lake of the Isles, Bademakoska, Cedar Lake, Brownie Lake, and the channel connecting Cedar and Isles. And all of this is available to you for $50 through the Loppet Foundation. That's the cost of the natural snow pass. And they keep these trails just groomed amazingly. And then I think it's $90 if you want to invest in the pass that gets you the natural as well as the man-made snow trails. So then you can go to like Theodore Wirth and other areas. But if you're thinking about skiing, I highly recommend it. You'll stay warm and it's so fun. And then other ways to stay fun. I think the key is if you can be having fun, you're going to be a lot more likely to be warm. I don't know. That's kind of my view. The more fun you're having, the less you forget about if you might be cold or not. So just some random activity ideas here of things you can do outside. On the Rovers web Facebook page, there has been an ABCs of winter that's been going, and a lot of people have been putting their ideas of for what activities start with A that you can do in the winter. And so that's been kind of fun to see. So if you're new to the group, especially, go ahead and, check out the Minnesota Rovers Facebook page, and there'll be a lot of ideas of winter fun there. And this picture here is at Lake Hiawatha. You can walk on Lake Hiawatha, or you can actually walk on the golf course. You can walk, snowshoe, or ski. You do need that ski pass to ski on it. And this is my 13-year-old dog. He randomly decided to run this weekend. But don't let yourself get too warm is kind of one of the last things I'll say, or you'll end up cold. And so you might think, well, I'll just dress really, really warm. But if you are dressed warm and then you get active and get sweaty, you're going to end up really cold. So the key is, if you do get sweaty, change into your dry clothes as soon as possible. So that, before you cool down from those wet clothes, you'll actually retain your body heat and stay warm. And then just one last thing. I know I've actually talked to some rovers this winter, that, it's a tough year with not being able to get together. And some people, the way they've gotten outside in the winter is through group activities. And when we don't have that, it takes kind of a positive self mindset and doing a lot of the work yourself and being in the right frame of mind. And so these are three quotes that I had read somewhere. I don't know where I read them last fall. I think I was doing some research on the web, trying to figure out how I'm going to get a positive attitude about winter, because I really in the past haven't had one. And these were three things that came to me, and I wrote them on a little note card and I keep it on my desk. And it really kind of is true. There's a lot of great things about winter if you're just looking for them. And then I'll leave you just with a few more pictures of winter fun that can be had. And you can stay warm while you're doing this, going out to explore. The first one on the left is Lake Nokomis, ice fishing. They have classes through the Three Rivers Parks if you're interested in ice fishing, if you want to learn how to do that. Top right is a community park in Edina. Just a note, if you like to snowshoe, I know there's been a lot of discussion on the Rovers board about where to go snowshoeing. One suggestion is, keep them in your car, and you can just pop out and pretty much snowshoe anywhere. I was driving around after an appointment one day. I saw this little community park and I thought, hey, I'm going to go wander in the woods there. And sure enough, I wandered in the woods, plenty warm. Bottom right is French Regional Park in Plymouth. It's one of the Three Rivers Park System parks. And there are so many places to snowshoe, ski, sled, just get outside, get active, have fun, stay warm in the parks there. The big picture on the left here is Town and Country Golf Course in St. Paul. A lot of the golf courses are open in the winter for sledding, hiking, snowshoeing, and skiing. Some of them do have a fee for skiing, but that's something to check out. Top right is Reservoir Woods in Roseville. If you're looking for a park where you can kind of get away and see nature, but yet be close to town there. And then the bottom right is the channel between Cedar and Isles when you're coming through. So one of the things in winter, a big plus I've found, is that you can have a lot of nature to yourself in winter. I never realized that. In the summer, a lot of places you go, you're dealing with crowds, but in the winter, you can really get some pristine scenes to yourself, and you can end up with a whole lake to yourself sometimes, or a whole trail. And then this tree just wants us to be happy. One day I saw this tree and he's just smiling at me, glad that I got out. Then the top right is Murphy Hanrahan Park, another Three Rivers. A note, I included that one. If you're looking for wide trails and less people, the further you get away from the metro, like instead of being in the core metro, a little bit further out, you'll find a lot more space and less people and wider trails. And then the bottom right is another plus of winter. This is Eagle Lake Park. And this is the channel between Eagle and Pike lakes. And, once the lakes freeze, you can walk or snowshoe or ski between the lakes, which is a big plus of getting out there as well. And then this is just last a couple of the sunsets, which is another wonderful winter activity. Bundle up, get outside, and you can see just gorgeous sunsets pretty much anywhere in the city. So I'm hoping that I've inspired some people to like winter as much as I do. I'm looking forward to when Rovers can do activities again. Till then, I'm just going to try to inspire people as much as I can, piece by piece, by posts or pictures or whatever. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to turn it over to Fran, and Fran is going to actually talk a little bit more about spending more extended time in the outdoors, which I know a lot of the experienced Rovers are big into that, as well as she's going to touch on her passion, which is being on the water. So
I would like to introduce Fran too. I just wanted to introduce Fran and let you know that she's been a Rover since 2007. She enjoys hiking, biking, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, camping, and especially sea kayaking. And she has ski kayaked in Canada, Mexico, New Zealand, and all over the US. She grew up in Texas, but she lived in Minnesota for decades. And it's only after joining the Rovers that she learned to switch from hunkering down to really embracing winter. And Fran is the only person that got me to turn over a kayak. So she went, I went on a trip with her up into Voyagers, and we had to learn how to flip over in a kayak and get out and get back in. So she's a fantastic instructor. And I'll turn it over to you, Fran. Thank you. And thanks a lot, Tina.
I also was not much of a Minnesota for many years, and it wasn't until I joined the Rovers that I really decided to hunker down. One of the things that's useful to know is how it is that our bodies lose heat, or that we lose heat. And there's 4 different ways. This is the nerdy part of my presentation, and I'm going to go through it real quickly, but it helps make sense out of the rest. You lose heat through evaporation and also respiration, which is increased if conditions are dry or windy, or if you're wearing wet clothing. You lose heat by radiation. A wood stove heats things by radiation, moving typically through air from one area, the heat moves out. You lose heat through conduction. So your body loses heat into the cold ground if you're lying on the ground. You lose about 2% of your heat from this, but it all depends on conditions. Water also conducts heat away more than air. So if you're also in water, it's increased by wet clothing when you're not in water. And convection, which is like the wind blowing or fan blowing, helps to lose heat. So these things are important because they affect some of the decisions you make. As Tina said, if you're really active, you can stay warm. But if you're camping, you know, you're going to be in a tent, you're going to be sleeping. The temperatures are going to drop down cold at night. And it could be, you know, 20 below easily with a wind chill in Minnesota. Before you go out, check the weather and have a way of checking the weather while you're out. Ironically, 133 years ago today, in 1888, it was a super warm day on the 12th of January. And then a blizzard came through. Hundreds of people, including like 230 people in Minnesota, died. Many of them were school children who went to school. It was a really nice day and headed home and were hit with this blizzard. We have ways of checking the weather when we're out. So phone, weather radio, etc. You know, those are important to keep track of the weather. And remember that your batteries may be a problem when it's super cold, whether it's your phone or a weather radio or that's a VHF radio. It's a marine radio, the picture, but it also picks up NOAA weather reports and things like that. But batteries may be a problem, and you need to keep the batteries warm, or the particular device warm. Let somebody know where you are and have a way to get help if needed, if you're going to be camping and out for a few days. Those things are really important. I'm going to talk a little bit about gear and considerations in keeping warm. When you're talking about tents, smaller is better. That's because your body heat is trapped and can warm it up better. I'm having stoves in canvas tents. I can't speak to that, and I'm hoping that when we ask for input, some people can. 4-season tents are different from 3-season tents. I have several nice 3-season tents, and they might be good in winter if I were in Texas, but they're vented and they're not good for Minnesota winter. They have mosquito netting and they're not as warm. As I understand it, the Equipment Locker does have 4-season tents. If it's sunny, you might want to face your door towards the southeast to take advantage of the morning sun. When you're thinking about where you're going to pitch your tent, you don't want to pitch it on top of a ridge where it'll be all windy, and then that'll take away some of the heat. But you also don't want to put it at the bottom of a hill because, you know, heat rises. So part way up is a better place to put it. And as in this picture, they dug out some of the snow to help shelter the tent a little bit. You want to not get snow in the tent, or if you get it in, brush it out right away, because either it's going to melt and stuff is going to be wet, or it'll melt, but then as the tent is warm, it'll add to condensation on the inside of the tent. And as soon as you have any frost forming on the inside of the tent, you really want to get that out of there, because that's going to make it damper and make it colder and all of that. Let's see. All right, it doesn't want to advance now. I'm not sure why my tech isn't working. It worked this morning. Hang on a minute. Here we go. So, clothing issues while you're sleeping in a tent. Don't sleep in all your clothes. you want to be warm, but you don't want to be overheated. And it also is really nice when you wake up in the morning to have something to put on when you get out of your bag, because you're going to be colder when you get out of your bag. A lot of times people want to put some of the clothing in their sleeping bag because they want it to be warm. And that's okay, but you don't want to put so much in your sleeping bag that you end up not having enough loft from it and not having enough space to warm up. It's the same as what Tina was saying about her puffy coats. Socks or no socks. I usually like to wear socks. I have feet that get cold. There are some people who have feet that sweat a lot and actually end up warmer if they don't wear socks. So it's something to think about. Protect your head, which is going to lose a lot of heat. On the one hand, you don't want to breathe into your bag because that can condense and your bag can get warm from your warm breath. But you want to protect your head, and a balaclava is also useful in a sleeping bag, as Tina was talking about. They're really great for this time of year. Any damp clothes that you don't want to wear them or have them in your bag at all, because that will add to the dampness. When I set up my bag, here's what I do. If it's super, super cold, I start the bottom layer with a closed cell foam. And I put that down as a bottom layer. It helps protect you from the ground. Some people, I always put a bottom closed cell foam layer. Then the next layer I put up is my inflated pad. And this isn't the one that I have, but I have an inflated pad that has down in it. Now, if you have one of those, you need to have a way of inflation, whether it's an integrated pump or one of those bags that they use to inflate it. You don't want to blow into it because that gets the down wet and messes it up over time. So those are the layers that go underneath my bag. I have a seriously warm bag, and I think about getting a bag that's at least rated 15 to 20 degrees colder than I think the coldest temperature is, because typically they rate those at kind of the coldest survival temperature. And that's not warm enough for me. So I get a super warm bag. And one of the things that I have is a sleeping bag liner, which mine is fleece, and it adds quite a bit to it. And in fact, sometimes in the summer when I'm summer camping and I really want to travel light, I use that liner and a really lightweight down quilt, and I don't even use a sleeping bag on top of my sleeping pad. So it's some of them are expensive, but they serve a lot of functions. So you want the right size bag. You don't want it too big, but you don't want it too small. You want to have room to warm it up. They also have vapor lock liners. I've never used one, but if you're concerned about moisture in your bag, that's a possibility. Also, some people double bag, but that sometimes means bringing two bags, and that's bigger than a liner. But all of these things are possibilities. You want to layer on top and underneath, but you don't want to crush the down too much, because then it won't work as well. And a couple of these things I've mentioned. Oh, when you're setting up camp, get your bag out, let it loft up, let that down spread out so that it'll be warmer before you get in. Before you get in, I like to warm up my bag. Chemical hand warmers work well. Hot water bottles work well, because that way I'm not using my body heat warming up my bag. And, we all know it's really nice to climb into a warm bag or a warm bed or something like that. You want to keep your other gear warm and dry. And some of that won't go in your bag. You may be concerned about your batteries, your boot and glove liners, your gloves. One thing you can do is put them between your foam pad and your inflatable pad. Obviously, you don't want to do that with anything sharp. If your phone or whatever, you may put it in a stuff bag. You can dry out boots and boot liners. Some people do that by putting hot water bottles or chemical warmers inside the boots to help them dry out and to help them be warm the next day, because it really sucks to put on a pair of frozen boots. Tina talked about the usefulness of good Sorels, and a lot of them come with massive boot liners, which are nice. I have my two warmest pairs of boots are my Sorels and my Will Steger Mucklucks. Both are pretty expensive, but they last forever, especially if you take care of them. The Mucklucks you'd have to take a little better care of, but they last forever. And the Mucklucks are a lot lighter than the Sorels. Now, some crazy people kayak in the winter when there's open water. This is a picture, actually, I believe that Joyce took this picture. Three of us were out on the St. Croix, and it's lovely reflections. If you do this, you need to be skilled and you need to take precautions. It's high risk. One thing people think is, oh, well, if there's a little ice, I'll break it up. If you try to break it up and you lean into it and there's a spot that's not as firm, you may very quickly go over and you're going to regret it. If you're going to be out, even if it looks like it's flat, you need to be skilled at rescues and getting back in your boat. You don't want to go alone. There's a gasp reflex when you hit the water that you need to be aware of. You want to dress for immersion, which in serious winter means a dry suit with appropriate base layers, and that's typically smart wool and fleece kinds of stuff. You also want to have a neoprene, not just a wool hat, neoprene gloves or pogies, neoprene booties. Tina already talked about ice issues. You want to be aware that floating ice on windy days, the wind can move it all around, and you can end up getting stuck or getting out in the middle of ice when you didn't intend to, and you need to be aware of weather changes. As soon as you hit the water, there's a really high risk of hypothermia. You probably have less than 10 minutes of meaningful activity really quickly. I try to practice getting back in my boat in 30 seconds to a minute because your hands start losing dexterity. Your muscles start freezing up. It's really hard. You lose strength, and it's a really serious situation. So only do this if you are out in groups of 3 or more, and you also need to have ways of getting help. But also don't count on it. So my Marine Band radio, phone, things like that are pretty important, and other kinds of emergency equipment and knowing how to use them. It's kind of cool. There were 3 of us this day, and we are on an iceberg in the Mississippi below the Fort Hart Dam. And here we are. I stayed in my boat. We're all wearing dry suits. We're all wearing warm clothes. You can see the gloves. We have spray skirts on our boats to keep the water out. We all know how to do rescues and rolls. Christopher said as he was standing there, he could feel the ice kind of melting under his boots. So he got back in pretty quickly after we took some pictures. But seriously, it looks like fun. There's a Center for Cold Water Safety online that really talks about some of the stuff that you need to know about that. And so that's all I'm going to say about that. I think you can have a lot of fun getting out in the winter. And I encourage people to do it and to think about what they need to do to make it fun and to stay safe.